All, this is Dr. Mobeen Syed from React 19 platform. And today with me, I think I'm so excited, Dr. Aimie Apigian. And she is the not only double board certified physician and then masters in chemistry and other things as well. We'll ask her. But for me, the most important thing is she's also the author of a book called The Biology of Trauma: How the Body Holds Fear, Pain, and Overwhelm, and How to Heal It. This is something that rings really near and dear to my heart because nowadays, after long COVID, some vaccine injuries, just generally stresses after COVID, financial stresses, people letting go of their jobs, the shutdowns, I think that all of us in this world at this time are scarred. So there is no one better than Aimie to discuss that and tell us what to do about it. So welcome, Aimie, and tell us about yourself before we start.
Well, thank you so much. I think that I'm more excited to be here than you are excited to have me here. I think that this is such incredible work that you're doing, such an incredible community that you've created here. Thank you for the work that you do. I am very excited to read the book that you're just finishing up because this interplay between the nervous system and the immune system is so critical. And I think that that's the new science for our time. So I'm Dr. Aimie, and yes, I have a lot of letters behind my name. And I first started studying trauma when I became a foster parent. And for me, that happened just as I was finishing my master's in biochemistry. And it really opened my eyes to this idea of trauma is not something that happened to us in our past. Trauma is something that unless we know how to resolve it in our past, it stays with us. It becomes our present moment. It becomes our biology. And now we get to look at how does that affect us today in a way that I know what to do to create a better tomorrow for myself. And that became my study. It in fact became more my study when in 2014, I developed a number of chronic health conditions that started my own inner trauma work. And trauma was never a word that I had related to. That was reserved for those people who had really bad things happen to them. And I was not that. And so I never knew that my own body was holding trauma, and got to go on that journey, which really then led me to redefining what is trauma and why does the body hold on to it, and what is the path for wholeness and health and authenticity, given that biology down to my cellular mitochondria and my immune system have been impacted, and what can I do about it even now as an adult? So that's my story. I'm super excited to be here.
So, Aimie, thank you so much. And once again, before I ask you questions about your book and your this thesis that you have, I once again have to admire that this book is out there. I'm going to very quickly share my screen and show the book to the audience as well. And myself for the React 19 have no strings attached here. This is the book, The Biology of Trauma: How the Body Holds Fear, Pain, and Overwhelm, and How to Heal It. So for me, that what is interesting is the word holds over here. Not just that how the body experiences fear, pain, and overwhelm, and how to heal it. That's fine. We all know that part. The holds part, I think, is the key word over here, which differentiates this book and this thesis from other books as well. So this is a great book. I actually have my Kindle open as well, and I am going through various parts of this book as well. Amazing book. So, Aimie, first of all, congratulations for the book. And now, let me start with this question. What is the difference between stress and trauma?
Oh, what a great question. And this is a fundamental question. One of the stories that I share in my book is about a patient, Kenneth, that I had. Now, you will appreciate this, Dr. Mobeen, that we learn things and we learn them in the textbook, and then we see it in real life for the first time. And we're like, whoa, that's what it looks like. Well, I had this experience with my patient, Kenneth. Kenneth was a veteran. And like many veterans, though many of us, he was using exercise as a way to distract himself from his inner emotions. So he's in the gym, he's lifting weights, but this morning he lifts weights, and instead of growing his muscles, it breaks his muscle. And he walks into the emergency room at the VA hospital, and his bicep was in the middle of his arm. It was not attached to his shoulder like it should be.
Wow.
And I had seen this in the
Wow.
textbook, but I never thought that I'd see it in real life. And here he was. And that is the difference between stress is something that can grow us. It's hard, it's uncomfortable, it stretches us, but we stay within what we call in medicine our homeostatic capacity, meaning I can adjust and it be within what I can keep manageable. But as soon as the body senses that something is beyond our capacity, it will cross a line and engage a very different survival strategy that's just breaking in order to keep us alive. Our body would rather break our muscle than to die. It knows that it might die if that weight falls on us, or if there's a life threat. It knows that we actually might die. And so our body says, my job is to keep you alive. And I'm sure, Dr. Mobeen, you've seen the body fight for life, fight to
Absolutely.
stay
Absolutely.
alive.
And keep making the bargains and the decisions to say, all right, I'm going to give away this thing to protect this thing, etc. So yes.
Exactly. And so that's exactly what happens, is that when we cross a line and what the threat, the danger, our responsibilities is more than what we can handle, our body shuts down to survive rather than fights to survive. And we can even look at in childhood, many of us, we will abandon ourselves in order to be whoever our parents want us to be, because that's how we know how to stay alive. Even though it's not healthy, even though we lose ourselves in the process, that's what our body does for us, is it makes those decisions that says it's better for us to break. It's better for us to lose ourselves. It's better for us to abandon ourselves than to lose what will keep us alive.
Very, very interesting. And of course, we have been reading in the physiology and pathology how these systems work, and then they break down. But here's an interesting and intriguing idea from your book. When you say that fear or pain can not only overwhelm us, but they can be held in us. What do you mean by they can be held in us? Is it that the memory that I have of something really bad happening, or there is more than that?
Oh, I love that question, because I've gotten that question. And sometimes my patients will joke with me, be like, oh, Dr. Aimie, is my fear held in my liver or is it in my big toe? And it's like, no, we're not talking about a specific location, though it's very interesting to see the overlay of Chinese medicine and this idea that grief is stored in the lungs. And what I talk about in my book is how much of that diaphragm does get shocked and stunned with grief, and how anger gets stored in the liver. That's another aspect of Chinese medicine. And it all fits in together. But what we're really talking about is that the body holds on to its perception of danger. And our body responds not to reality, it responds to our perception of reality. And when I say the body, I'm really talking about the autonomic nervous system. And I want to differentiate that from the central nervous system. And that's been the primary focus of trauma and even trauma therapy for decades, is using our mind and working with our explicit memories in our brain. But our body has a mind of its own. Our body has memories of its own. Let me give a very brief example. And this is a story that was shared with me just recently while I was traveling around on my book tour. And this lady said that someone in her family was hurt sexually by her uncle when she was 2 years old. The family decided as a whole, let's never talk about this because she's too young to remember. Now, they did amazing precautions and they made sure that that uncle was never around that person again. And so this person never saw that uncle again until 18 years old. And they're having a family reunion. And by now she's 18, she's safe, right? So she does not know any of this. She was never told because she's too young to remember. She walks into the living room, sees this uncle for the first time, and her body breaks out in an immediate rash. And you're going to tell me that the body doesn't hold memory? So this idea that we don't always have the memories in our brain, we don't remember things, but our body somehow seems to hold on to this memory. It's very interesting that the memory is held in our immune system. In fact, that's what our immune system does. Our immune system is a memory system to remember everything that we've ever been exposed to that felt dangerous so that it can create an immediate reaction when it sees it again. And that's the same thing that our autonomic nervous system does. In fact, our autonomic nervous system and our immune system are so intimately connected, you can't really separate the two. They're not really two separate systems. And our autonomic nervous system, thus, when we're talking about holding something, it holds the sensory information. The sensory information being what we see, what we taste, what we smell, what we hear, and the energy. So what we perceive. All of this is what informs our nervous system that there might be danger here. And that is why something can happen to us even as far back as 2 years of age. We don't have explicit memory of it, but our body is showing that I have memory that there is something in my environment that is very dangerous. And I am going to react as if it were a life threat right now.
Understood. This is profound and very, very interesting. And I totally believe you because I've been working on these concepts for a very long time. I have a question here for the audience. I would repeat this that I believe since COVID, having COVID or the vaccine, inflammation from COVID, long COVID, some people with the vaccine injuries, then all the socioeconomic outcomes, the people getting fired, people in shutdowns. I mean, there were so many ways that the stresses and traumas appeared. To me, it seems like, and I may be wrong, that we all adults and even children have become traumatized by the last few years of COVID. And we need to figure that out. How do we actually get that trauma out? So how does it overwhelm us and how to heal it? So before we reach to the point of healing it, this is something that is going to be applicable for the whole universe at this time. Your book should be in everybody's hand because this tells us how do we cope with what we got stuck in, right? So my question to you is, you discuss in your book about mitochondria, you discuss about immune system cells. What is the role of the mitochondria in all of this, in the holding of the trauma? Where do mitochondria come in from?
You know, this is so fascinating to see the connection with something like COVID. And there are some studies that showed the role of the nervous system and how the more, we'll call it dysregulation, the more dysregulated a nervous system was prior to exposure, the more at risk someone was of infection and symptoms. And so that tells me that the nervous system is responding to our meaning of something. And there is and was a lot of meaning attached to what was happening and the financial insecurities and the loneliness, the social isolation. So much goes into our perception of danger. And then we look at, well, what does the body need? When the nervous system perceives that level of danger, it actually shuts down our metabolism. It actually shuts down our mitochondria. By shutting down, I really mean dimming down. So you're dimming down the lights for how much energy your mitochondria are going to produce. Now, this is very key in the new science that involves the polyvagal theory. Very important science for those who are dealing with any long haul reactions or symptoms. And it's the idea that our nervous system has 3 different states. And these different states are operating systems. And it's the operating system for the whole body. So it's like driving in first gear. When you're driving in first gear in your car, everything is in first gear. It's not just the transmission, it's also your engine. It's also your tires. Everything is in first gear. And you shift a gear and the whole thing shifts. So that's how it is with our body. When we are in this calm, alive state, everything is operating as if it's calm and alive. When we're in the stress state, everything is stressed out. You're not just going to have your nervous system stressed out, you're going to have your mitochondria stressed out. And mitochondria that are in a stress state, they are making more energy for you than they will ever do in any other state. That's what stress asks of them. Stress is coming to your mitochondria in the form of adrenaline and saying, mitochondria, we need you to make more energy and make it more efficiently. Can you do that for us? And your mitochondria hunker down, they change shape, they hunker down to do their best so that we can overcome that stress. But then we talk about this overwhelm. And that's what I would want people to know. When they feel overwhelmed, not the high energy of anxiety and stress, but the low energy, the heaviness of overwhelm, shame, powerlessness, helplessness, their nervous system is now giving their mitochondria a signal to not make as much energy. And whatever energy they are making, to conserve that energy, which means only use it if absolutely necessary. Only use it for what you need to survive, but nothing extra. And that is why everything begins to feel so hard. Everything feels like it takes so much of our energy. And we only want to do those things that I absolutely have to because I'm saving my energy. That is how we can know that we even have stored trauma in our nervous system when we feel that background sense of depletion and everything feels hard. And it's because our nervous system has dimmed down the lights of our metabolism and our mitochondria.
Very, 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 very interesting. So then the POTS patients, the patients of dysautonomia, for example, which were either because of the young age and some genetic issues or other traumatic issues, or chronic inflammatory states or COVID and long COVID or vaccine injuries, is it possible that some of this can actually be looked at as the trauma accumulating and causing the dysautonomias, and then could be healed with trying to heal from trauma?
So I'm going to say yes, and then I'm going to explain by saying that this is the essence of the concept of a biology of trauma. It is not just that trauma becomes our biology. That's just the first half of the concept. The second part of the concept is that that same biology, that same dysregulation of the immune system, of the mitochondria, of our detoxification system that gets disrupted. Now that same biology is feeding cues of danger to our nervous system that keeps it in dysregulation. And now we have dysautonomia because our own biology, as well as our ongoing sense of fear and insecurity and overwhelm, it keeps us stuck in this very overwhelm.
Very, very interesting. So what you're saying is that from the trauma, not only there are memories and bad perceptions and the fears, but there is actually physiological changes within our body's systems, even down to the levels of mitochondria, which are like tiny little things within the cells. They all change.
Everything changes. And
And so
that's what
that,
I lay out in section 1 of the book. I really wanted section 1 of the book to be, here is exactly what's happening when your body experiences a trauma response. It is not just mental. It is not just emotional. It is physiological. And so in chapter 1, I lay out, here are the 5 steps that the body goes through physiologically that makes it go into a trauma response. If it doesn't go through those 5 steps, it's not a trauma response. These are the ways our body experiences trauma, and it happens at a cellular level, also at the system level, because we can look at the digestive system, we can look at the immune system, cardiovascular system, but even at the cellular level, it is creating changes in our physiology and biology.
very, very, very interesting. So then tell me this, as much as I want to ask a question about those 5 steps, I have another question that I've been playing with in my head, and that is the corticosteroids or the cortisols in the stresses and fears and those kind of fright responses. Do the stress responses, the hormonal responses, also have a contribution towards accumulation of this fear in our body?
Oh, what a great question. This is where I have come to a different understanding than what I was taught and what all physicians are taught. And that is around the role of cortisol. And we've all been taught that cortisol is bad, that cortisol means problems, and that high cortisol is the one that's causing so many, in medicine, we call this, the allostatic load, or the accumulation of the burden of stress in the body. But what started to change my mind was the idea that when I was working in the hospital and I was covering the emergency room, for example, and I had someone come in and they had an asthma attack, lots of inflammation, their throat was closing in. I needed something to reduce that inflammation very fast. What was it that I gave them to reduce inflammation? It was a form of cortisol.
Right.
So where did I get the idea then that cortisol increases inflammation if I use it medically to decrease inflammation? And the other model that we're working on here, and I can appreciate that not everyone was taught in these medical models, so I'll just summarize that we do have a model in medicine for stress and chronic stress, and that has been our gold standard of truth. This was developed by a physician, brilliant physician, stress researcher. His name was Dr. Hans Selye, Selye, and he put together this visual. You can look it up on Google or probably AI these days, where it shows you how the body goes into a stress and then where it starts to be what he called maladaptive. That stress is now causing harm because it's become chronic. And now I have a very different version of actually what is happening that he called maladaptive chronic stress. And I'm going to say that is not stress, that is the trauma response. And what we see is that stress physiology is like a sprint. A sprint is how fast you can run. That's what stress is. How fast can you run? How big of a problem can you overcome? And when we look at a sprint, not only are we going to look at how fast can you run, but how long can you run that fast? And a person who can run a mile that fast is so much better at overcoming a problem than someone who can sprint, but I'm going to fade out after 10 seconds. I'm the one who's going to get caught by the bear, but my friend who can run longer at that same fast pace is going to overcome the problem and not be experiencing a trauma from that very same experience. And so we look at what is the role of cortisol. The first energy message that we get comes from adrenaline. Adrenaline is what gives our mitochondria that go, go, go message. It's going to start the sprint. And if our body says, I need more time, then that's when it says, cortisol, I need your help. I need your help because we need to keep sprinting. And this is going to take longer than what I have the adrenaline for. Adrenaline comes on in about 15 minutes, peaks maybe at about 20 minutes. And so its job is actually to protect us from adrenaline. Adrenaline is so powerful, it's toxic. It damages our tissues, it creates inflammation, and it specifically triggers the immune cells in our brain that are called microglia that cause all the brain inflammation and the brain fog. Cortisol buffers that. So if cortisol is not doing its job of actually helping us to decrease inflammation, then that means that something else is happening, that the cortisol that is there is not able to do its job. And now we come back to this idea of shifting our state. And when we shift into this overwhelmed state, we can have all the adrenaline in the world. We can have all the cortisol in the world, but it's not actually doing its job because our body is not responding to it. It says, no, I have the emergency brake on. Adrenaline is the gas pedal, but I have the emergency brake on. And so that's where we see that even though there's all this cortisol, it's also a lot of inflammation because we have taken the brake off, and now cortisol is not able to protect us and buffer us. So it's not that cortisol is causing the high inflammation, it's that high cortisol is not able to do its job. Very similar to what happens in metabolic syndrome when we have a lot of insulin, high insulin, but it's resistant. It's not actually getting its message to the cells to bring in glucose. So you could call this a trauma response takes us into cortisol resistance.
That's amazing, because I was going to bring up the insulin resistance as well, and you already brought it up. That's very interesting to talk about the cortisol resistance. So then let me ask you, let's transition from, let's say, pathology and physiology towards the disease.
Yeah.
What are the signs? So imagine if I have some sort of trauma accumulated from childhood or from COVID or from whatever. How do I know what illness is? Because we all start becoming ill 40, 50 years into our life. Maybe a bunch of that contribution is from these, accumulation of fears and pains or trauma. How do I know what may be because of trauma? What signs and symptoms do I have that I can attribute to this? Is it inflammation, chronic inflammation, something else?
Yes. There are patterns that we can use to recognize stored trauma in the body. One of those patterns is the pattern of disconnection. Now, this pattern comes from the survival strategy that we enter when we go into a trauma response, which is, this is so unbearable that I need to disengage from myself because I don't want to feel this. I don't want to be present while this is happening. And unless we resolve that trauma response at that time, that's how it becomes chronic. And so now we can start to see a pattern in our life, in our relationships of disconnection. We start to not want to feel our body because there's overwhelm, there's grief, there's sadness, there's anger, there's things that we don't want to feel. And so we start disconnecting. We can disconnect from other people. We can disconnect from life. Many people describe being surrounded by people, but they feel all alone because they have this pattern of disconnection. So that would be something for me to share with people, is that if they have a diagnosis, we can look at, do you have these other patterns of trauma that would suggest that it's part of the picture? Another pattern is the pattern of disruption. And that's because when our body goes into a trauma response, it is like throwing that emergency brake on in our car. And we paralyze, we immobilize. And there's this idea that it now feels dangerous for me to be seen. It feels dangerous for me to take up space. It feels dangerous for me to be fully alive. It feels safer to stay small. It feels safer to be hidden. And because of that, there's this stuckness, and we don't move forward in life. We don't grow in life as we normally would because we just feel stuck. So that would be another pattern is, do people recognize feeling stuck in some area of their life? Or maybe they're ones that start projects but can't finish projects well. There's that idea of the forward movement is somehow being blocked. And it seems like something inside of me holds me back. So that would be another pattern. The third pattern is depletion. We've mentioned why. When we are in that state, our mitochondria get dimmed down. And so we have the sense of depletion. One way that many people describe this is feeling like they're running on empty. If you feel like you're running on empty, your body is in a state of overwhelm. And that state always creates dysregulation of the nervous system, which can only create disease. So even rather than the word trauma, I then start to use the word nervous system dysregulation. And that is what we're looking for. We're looking for, how does your system respond to stress? How does your system respond to change? How does your system respond to loss, grief, life? Because that's what life is. Life is all of these things. And when we have a dysregulated nervous system, our responses are never as they should be. They're either overreactive or underreactive. And isn't that what dysautonomia is? Dysautonomia is just an overreactive nervous system that's reacting to everything more than what it should. And that can only create disease, right? Like this is what you teach. Dysregulation only can create disease. It will never create health. And so when I'm working with anyone with any chronic health symptom, I'm now saying we need to do nervous system regulation as part of the program and your treatment plan that we're working on.
Absolutely. That is fascinating. That means that medical students need to learn this methodology, these theses, these concepts. Doctors need to learn them. I mean, no offense to any of the doctors. I have lots of doctors who are my students and lots of doctors who are my friends. I admire them and their work and their hard work. But I do not think that the doctors are, majority of them are aware of these mechanisms that are happening at the mitochondrial level. And isn't that actually a less than optimal outcome for the patient?
100%. And I'm going to share something with you that gives me room to say 100% and not just 95% true. When I started incorporating nervous system regulation into my practice, by this time, Dr. Mobeen, I was an addiction medicine doctor. I had left surgery and I had decided to go all in studying trauma and the body. And I thought, what better place than addictions? And it was wonderful. I mean, talk about learning so much about a nervous system that is so overwhelmed that I need a substance in order just to feel like I can make it through the day, just to make sure that I can be okay, to find my escape from this overwhelm that I find myself in. And as they're coming off of their substances, their nervous system is so sensitive. It's not used to real life. It's not used to having to feel. And so I had to get very, very good at being able to teach them nervous system regulation that even would help them not relapse when they had a trigger. But as I'm applying those same nervous system regulation skills to other patients now who have chronic pain, who have digestive issues, anxiety, depression, let's throw in some insomnia and sleep issues, I'm finding that it's working just as well for them. And even before I would do anything else, medications, supplements, anything else, I started saying, I am seeing so much change with just the nervous system regulation that I'm going to have you do that first for 21 days because it seems to establish a new baseline that then I really have more clarity on what I'm working with. And then I know, is this a neurotransmitter imbalance that I need to support you with, whatever that is, supplements, medication. But until the nervous system calms down, everything just looks messy. And I feel like I'm throwing spaghetti at the wall. Well, let's try Lexapro. No, let's try this SSRI. No, let's try this. Let's try that. And so calming down the nervous system, this is the number that I was getting from my patients. 26% decrease in daily physical pain, 28% decrease in all GI issues, 28% decrease in fatigue, 30% decrease in depression, 30% decrease in anxiety. And I'm looking at these numbers, Dr. Mobeen, and I'm saying, what pill has ever been able to do these numbers
None of those.
for this many things,
Correct.
all in a single person?
Correct. There is no pill that can do such a versatile effect and so much. So then I'm totally excited. Tell me, how do we heal? There are so many people who are suffering with the chronic inflammatory diseases from long COVID, from vaccine injuries. There are people, youngsters, who have brain fog, who have cognitive decline, who have small fiber neuropathies, who have dysautonomias, who have POTS, who cannot walk, who cannot, do their normal day-to-day activities, who have myalgias. And this is very, very common now. So how do we now fix this?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? What do we do about it now?
Yeah.
And it is, I'm going to say it's simple. Doesn't mean easy, but I do see that there are principles of the body that we can engage with, that we can apply. And from my experience with working with the body, I'll be curious to see what you think, Dr. Mobeen. The body can heal itself. I just need to give it what it needs, and then it can heal. I discovered this starting in my surgery residency, where when I closed an incision after surgery, my job as the surgeon was to create the environment, make it dry, make it clean, keep it well nourished, give them good food, make sure that they have the protein that they can heal up an incision. But that's what I needed to do. My job was to create the environment, and the body did the rest. So now I apply that to trauma healing, and I say, all right, if the body is designed to know how to heal our trauma by itself, then what is blocking that? What is blocking our body's ability to heal? And I can see that there's a lot of different blocks, and it comes from our culture of rushing around. It comes from our highly toxic world where we are constantly bombarded. We don't have that even safety of the air we breathe and the food we eat and the bed that we sleep on. Everything is toxic. And then what about our own biology and our own beliefs about ourselves now? So I've laid it out as a framework to say, if we recognize trauma patterns that have persisted, then this is what we do. We identify the underlying reason for why our body has been blocked. And that will always be at 3 levels. There will be a mind level, there will be a body level, and there will be a biology level. And so where we start is we start people through this essential sequence that's 3 phases, and it starts with safety. And this is what I would want people to know, is it doesn't actually start with going into your story. It doesn't actually start with processing your childhood or that traumatic event that you had. That's not where we start. Where we start is to say, we'll come back to those later, but right now, we're not ready to re-experience those emotions and to create a different outcome. And we would then just relive those same experiences rather than resolve them. So first, let me learn the skills to create an inner sense of safety and create thus an inner environment of safety because that is how we change the environment that our body needs to engage its own healing strategies. This is not what we are taught to do, Dr. Mobeen. We are not taught this. I think learning these skills, I call them somatic self practices, because they involve your body and that felt sense. It's not going to be enough to tell yourself that you're safe. Your body has to actually feel safe. So then we go into all these deeper things that's in my book, like neuroception and attachment and all these things. But the idea is that it has to be a felt sense. It has to be the perception of safety. And when we create that as our inner environment, it allows our body to get out of its inner environment of fear and danger and survival. And now with a new environment of internal safety, it can turn on those mitochondria again. It can turn on those detoxification pathways again. It can turn on a healthy immune system again. And now we become friends and are aligning with our body for the healing journey, as opposed to trying to heal, but our body says, I don't know what you're doing, but I still feel under attack. I'm still in danger. So I'm not even going to give you the energy to do your trauma work because I'm just trying to survive today. So again, the first step is learning to create an inner environment of safety, and it has to be the perception of safety. That's the real trick.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So then tell me this. How do people find you? So of course, those who are going to listen to this, they're going to be looking for a guided approach. And once again, for the audience, there is no strings attached from React 19 or from me with Aimie. We think that she is doing a great job. She's written a great book. I actually personally love that book. So it is useful to bring her message to you. At the same time, I would love to actually know, Aimie, if somebody is trying to reach out to you, how do they reach out to you? How do they find you?
Yes. So here's what I would love to be able to offer people is I teach and give away 5 of these somatic exercises that were so helpful for my patients to create an inner environment of safety. They're free on my website. And so you can get started with them and learn them and apply them. If you want more, then you can find more. And that's where you can find it on my website, biologyoftrauma.com/book. And that is where you are going to see the 5-day nervous system reset. Access the 5-day nervous system reset right there. That's it. And so what you'll do is you'll come here, you'll put in your information, and these are 5 exercises that you can do. So this is
That is amazing.
my gift. These exercises are so powerful. Again, it's powerful to be able to do something, Dr. Mobeen, right? I think that so much of our powerlessness, especially with a chronic health condition, is that I don't know what to do about it. I feel stuck. And so to be able to say, I now know what I can do. I can sit down and I can do this somatic exercise. Only takes 2 minutes, but I can do something to help myself. That even can shift our trauma responses and put us into a state of agency rather than helplessness.
That is amazing. So before we break, I want to give you an example of a patient that I had been in contact with. So the patient has a current age 72 years, 20 years diabetic, 11 or 12 or 13 years insulin dependent, and his blood sugar is usually 200 to 50. A couple of years ago, it was even 350 or more. Majority of the doctors said for his age, this is fine. And I'm his friend. I did not never think that that was the correct way. So I asked his doctors and worked with them to change the insulin levels, to change the insulin, amounts and the metformins and others. But he would just always have something near 200, and it would not go down. Even if you don't give any carbohydrates, his liver is now insulin resistant, and that is producing carbohydrates, and it was just a mess. One day, I was visiting him, and he said, I have asked my friends that let's all go to this, really good, nice vacation area. We said, sure. So we all, about 5 or 6 of us, went to a very beautiful green and hilly area. And we got disconnected from the whole world and we stayed there for 5 days. And Amy, can you imagine? On the very first day, his blood sugar went from 250-ish down to 130, 140. And he was eating everything the same way as he was eating before. He had to quickly reduce his insulin units because the body was just handling the carbohydrates. And for 4 or 5 days that we stayed there, he had to continue to taper his insulin levels. His sugar levels were 130, 140, 150. He was just amazed. So what we thought was that, hey, we are here in the vacation area, so we're walking a little more, and there is this olive tea kava that we are taking. Maybe it has something to do with that, etc. So we kind of made up a lot of stories in our head. He comes back, same food pattern, and he goes back up to 250 to 300. So I said to him, I said, look, this seems to me the association with the environment and some trauma that is associated, and that is what is causing stress and this kind of resistance. So none of he's a rich man, he's a board of doctors with him, they didn't care. A few years after, he visited US. And once again, the day he landed, his his glucose levels went from 200-ish down to 120, 130, 140. And no change. And he started once again cutting down on insulin. It went from 32 units down to 26 units and continued to go down. And he was eating similar things. Yesterday, or day before yesterday, I had a call and he said, Doctor, I have finally agreed with you that this is something to do with trauma and stress. I said, how? He said, I went to my farm. So he has a farm with lots of cattle and farm, lands and etc. He said, I went to my farm and one of our horses had injury to its hoof. And the doctor had said to keep her hoof in a clean water and do not let it be dirty. And when I went there for 15 days, it was still the same way dirty. And I asked the attendees, the ones who take care of these horses, that why didn't you clean it? And they said, somebody else said it's fine. And he said, right on that place, within half an hour, my blood sugar went from 130/40 to 250. And I had not eaten anything. Right? So to me, that is a stress and trauma acting and reacting. Does that make sense in light of your thesis?
Yeah. I mean, this is perfectly describing what happens in our physiology when we are experiencing fear versus when we're experiencing safety. This is it. We can see it. And I'm still amazed that there are physicians in the world that don't see it and won't tell their patients about this connection.
Interesting. So thank you so much for that. I have a few questions as well, not a lot, from the audience. So one of the question is, how about terpenes or sunlight or grounding? Does that have any role in this healing?
What a great question. So through my lens, I'm always asking, what will be the effect on my nervous system? Is it a cue of danger that it will put it into a stress zone? Or is it a cue of safety? But everything is information, just like the food that we eat. The food is just information to our body. Everything that we take in through our senses is information. Is that information helpful, or is it putting us into a stress? Now, let me be clear. Stress is not bad. Stress is not bad. What is bad is when we are stressing ourselves when we don't need to be. Stress does come at a cost. So I want to save my stress response for when it really matters, because I want to have enough to be able to overcome that. And then what is also not helpful is for me to go from stress into overwhelm. And that happens when the stress just becomes too much. And so that's also why I want to be very cognizant about how much stress, how many cues of danger is my body receiving so that I can keep it at a manageable level. So grounding for most people is very strong cue of safety, connecting with nature, connecting with the earth. And so all the things that you can do, even bringing in plants into your environment. We know from studies that bringing in plants can be cues of safety to your nervous system. So sunlight, morning sunlight, oh my goodness, that's one of the best ways to align with our body's circadian rhythm. And every single time that we align with a rhythm in our body, that is a cue of safety. It feels like danger if I'm having to live a life that's not aligned with my rhythms and my body's having to adjust in order to try to do something different than what it was naturally designed to do. So when I can align myself with my circadian rhythm and I get morning sunlight, that's a breath of fresh air for my body. It's, things must be safe if I can live a life and orient my day to what is most healthy for me.
Understood. Thank you very much. Another question, Colleen says, so then how can we remove chronic conditions, or are they permanent?
Ooh, and by chronic conditions, I'm assuming we're talking about chronic health conditions. And it's been my experience that there is a lot of this that we can reverse. That is what I did with my chronic fatigue and autoimmunity. That is what happened to me in 2014, is that I was ignoring my own body's messages of overwhelm and fear for so long that it finally had to get my attention. And I could not get out of bed one morning. The fatigue had gotten so bad. And that's when I went, and they didn't have an answer for me. All of my labs were relatively normal. So they gave me the diagnosis of chronic fatigue syndrome of unknown etiology. And then that's also when we discovered autoimmunity. I have reversed both of those. My autoimmune markers are normal. I don't have autoimmune markers anymore. And so that is the hope that I have, is that so much of what we have for chronic illness can be reversed. I like to use the word repair, Dr. Mobeen. I don't know what word you like to use, but I like to use the word repair.
I like the word repair more than the reverse, although I use the word reversal, but I
Right.
like repair more. So I'll use that. I'm going to borrow that from you.
It's free to share. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. So same message. Colleen have a more direct question now. Can we fix Hashimoto's after 35 years, 34 years?
I have seen that happen. So there are people who come through my programs, and some of them are even on medications for Hashimoto's. They've been able to get off of their medications and repair. So I am always amazed at what the body is able to do. I am convinced that the body has such wisdom, and that the possibilities for our health are even more than what we realize.
Very good. Very good. Thank you very much. So with this, Aimie, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for the book that you've written. Thank you for your insights. Any last words of advice before we break?
You know, I'd love to just leave on that note, Dr. Mobeen, the word of hope. You know, when I talk about trauma, I don't think of it now as a heavy topic, a depressing topic. Let's talk about our trauma. I see trauma as something that has so much hope for repair, that I have seen many people create and have a better life than they've ever had in their entire life, because we haven't even known that we've been carrying this stuff for so long. And we've been so scared to open up, and feels like opening Pandora's box. And why would I want to do that? But actually, for me, the biology of trauma is a message of hope, because now that we know the tools, we know where we can leverage our energy, our time, our attention that will really make a difference in our life, we can create a much better life than what we've ever had. We can actually be our most authentic selves in a way that we've never even been before. And so it's exciting for me to think of what is possible And it's just there's no end to that. There is no end to that destination of what more could be possible.
Such an excellent message. Hope is actually the beginning of recovery. So thank you so much for that message. So with this, Aimie, thank you very much for joining us from React 19, from me, from our audience. And as soon as we get this edited, I'll share this with you as well. And I hope I can have you again with some more specific discussions around dysautonomias or mitochondria, etc.
I would love that. You are doing such amazing work in the world. So would love to support you however I can.
Awesome. Thank you very much, and bye for now.